So this is what we're going to end up finishing today. So before we actually do it, before you do it, you should go to the Canvas page and go down to the Thursday section of the home page, and you'll see it says that you should download this file, and there is a file there, a JPEG file that has a picture of a fox leaping. And let's see. I have to undo this so you can see it. I'll just delete that. So this is the fox leaping that you will be using, and then we're going to put text and have it visible through the text. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start a new composition. So I'm hoping that you've all downloaded that JPEG by now. So let's see. I'm going to start a new composition, and I'm going to call this my last name, my first initial, and leaping. You can call it leaping, or you can call it leaping fox. And what you want to do is you want to start the composition at 5 seconds long. So make sure it says 5 seconds down here. You want to make sure that it is the HDTV 720p 29.97. And here's that again. And when you've got that set up, say OK. So it's empty. And I'm going to just, I'm going to hide this in a folder because I need to upload it. And you want to watch me uploading it too. Okay. So now I'm going to import the provided JPEG file. So first I'll stop sharing and I will go to the page that I've got. So I'm going to go to Chrome. So here you can say I'm going to download the leaping fox. So down here in Thursday, this is the page with the directions for the tutorial. And this is the JPEG. You can see there's the fox. I'm going to download it, and I'm going to search for my flat images folder, and I'm going to save it into my flat images folder. I've got to make sure that it's the correct folder for the correct project, because I've got so many different After Effects projects and I use the same folder names for everything. So I want to make sure it's in the correct folder. Now, you may not do the way I do it, but you want to make sure that this file is connected to and located with your tutorials After Effects project. Okay, so now I've got that downloaded. I'm going to stop sharing again, and then I will go back to sharing After Effects. So now I know where it is, and I know what I need to do. So I've got this opened up. I'm going to set my workspace. You want to set your workspace for text. So make sure it says text. And now I'm going to select my text tool, and I'm going to double click on it so I can enter. Oh, you have to make sure that your timeline is selected once again. I'm always really bad about that. So select your timeline, make sure it's got the blue line around it, and then double click your text tool, and now you can enter the text. And the text that I want to enter is leaping or leaping fox. It's up to you if you want to have leaping fox, or you can just have leaping. And I think I'm going to use leaping because it's not as big. Now this is already set to the right size. And I know that because I did it earlier, but I'm going to double click here, make sure that that is, and I'm going to reset my workspace. And now I'm going to come up here to my character. So the character window should be up here on the right. I want to make sure that I've got Helvetica bold, and the text size should be 178 pixels. So let's see, character, come on, open up again. So my character is Helvetica or Helvetica Nua, whichever one you want, bold. And this is because we want something that is sans serif and that's wide enough so you can see through it, because we're going to make it into a mask. And it's going to be big enough so that we can get enough of the image behind it showing to make it actually effective. So now I've got that, and now I can Command S to save this. I'm going to change back to my Move tool, Selection tool, Move. I'm going to make sure that this is centered. So I know that I had the paragraph centered here. So paragraph centered, and I had used my double click to make sure that it was centered, but I'm going to make sure that it's also centered vertically. So I want to use the align. So go down and find your align. And if I don't have it open, I have to open it. Here we go, align. And I'll make sure that it's also centered vertically and horizontally. There it is, should be good. And now I'm going to say File, Save. So it's saved. So all we have here is text. It's just text. It's one layer, nothing in there other than that. But now we want to get that picture of the fox. So I'm going to import a file, and I'm going to import the picture of the fox. Okay, so you've got your text. You've got your image that we had downloaded from Canvas, and we've got it all in our leaping composition. Now we're going to drag this picture behind the word leaping. Both of them are visible. And at this point, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter what color your text was as long as you could see it, because we're going to turn the text into a mask. So I've got leaping fox selected. It's roller something leaping fox, red fox. I've got it selected. I'm going to come to the bottom and I'm going to click on this button until I can see mode and track mat. Because usually it says this. It's just showing you all of these controls for each layer, but I'm going to change it to mode and track mat. And under track mat, I'm going to click here next to the word none. There's a caret, click on it, and we're going to go down to alpha mat leaping. Now, what has happened? The fox is now visible only where the text exists. I'm going to choose P for position for the JPEG layer, and I'm going to move the JPEG until I can see the face of the fox. I'm going to put the face of the fox in the G so I can see his face, because he's rather attractive. So this is something you can do. You can make your text into a mask by using the track mat. And I'm going to Command save to make sure that's saved. You see that the leaping layer, there's no eyeball, and it's got this interesting sort of icon here. That means it's being used as a mask. And here you can see that the red fox layer, the eyeball has changed because now it's showing through something else. It's masked off. It's an alpha mat. So Command S to make sure that's saved. Now the different kinds of track mat, you can have alpha mat, you can have alpha inverted, and then the fox shows, but the text is cutting holes through it. So if I put something else behind that, you would be able to see that. Let's see, what else do I have that I can put behind that? I'll just put another another copy of the Fox, and I'll move it around so you can see that there's actually a window through the text there, because it's not there anymore. It's just like nothingness. You can also have it set to be Luma matte or Luma inverted, but that makes more sense if you've got more things happening. We're going to stick with alpha. Let's save that. Now, the interesting thing also about this is that your text is still text. It's a mask, and the eyeball is no longer visible in the little box for visibility, but it's still actually text. So you can add an animator for position, and you can add an animator to that. So under animator 1, you can add animators for opacity and blur. And even scale. And I'm going to keyframe the start. I'm going to drag over. Well, first I'll put in some numbers here. So I'm going to change the position so that leaping goes above the frame. I'm going to change the scale to make it larger.
Miss Naki, could you hold on a second?
Yes.
I am trying to find out where that animator 1 is. So under text, I've got path options, more options, and then transform.
Under text, you go over to the far right and you see the word animate. And you click on the triangle in the circle next to animate.
And I pick what?
Position.
Okay.
And then animator 1 shows up. Then you go to add, and you add opacity and scale, and then down at the bottom, blur. And like I say, I'm going to go through this again. I'll do it a second time. So I'm going to move this position up just a little bit more, and I'm going to change the blur to 100, which will be incredibly insane, and scale to 400. And then opacity I'll make 0. I'm going to command save. And now I'm going to go to 215. So I drag my CTI over, and then I check over here on the far left above in the timeline, and it says 215. And now I'm going to pull my start to 100%. And I'll command save. And now I'll press the space bar and we'll see what happens. So see, you can put, it didn't go all the way to 100, did it? How come not? Something weird is happening. It's 99%. I thought it was 100. There, now it's 100. Okay, so you can see that there's a lot you can do with this, because not only is it still text, and not only is it a mask, but you can do all kinds of motion with it. You can get some really interesting effects with this. Okay, so are there any questions?
I do.
Okay.
So I got all the numbers that you got. I added all the animators, but like when I clicked the stopwatch for start at 2:15 like you did, but when I press spacebar, like nothing happens. Like my background's white, but so it's just like the white screen the whole time.
Okay, do you have more than one keyframe? So I've got a keyframe on 0 that is set to 0%.
Okay.
And then I have a keyframe at 2:15 that's set to 100%.
Oh, maybe that's why. Hold on. Let me press spacebar. Yeah. Now it's right.
Okay.
And there, how can I change the background of the? Because when you first open a new composition, like my background initial is white, and with this it would be cooler if it's black like yours. Do you know where I can change that?
Yes, so make sure that you've got the timeline selected and you have that current composition, and then go up to composition settings, and down at the bottom there's a box that says background color, and you can set it to black.
Okay, I see.
There you go. And anytime you want to know, the number for black is 000000. So,
all right, I got what you got now. Cool.
Okay, great. So make sure that's saved. So now, let me stop sharing for a second, make sure we don't have more people waiting in the waiting room. Okay. So that is what we do for the leaping fox. And I will do that again. Give people a couple more minutes if there's any more questions. I'll do that one again. And after that, then I will go ahead and go back to timing 01, and I'll do that again.
So all we really did was blur the text, right?
Well, well, position
Yeah.
and scale and opacity and blur.
Okay.
With text animators, I find that when I'm having text come on, usually adding to the animator blur and opacity makes it work better. Because otherwise the text kind of eternally exists, and when you want it coming on, having it come in and become opaque as it comes on and having a little blur around it so it doesn't obscure everything right away, that makes it look more comfortable in a sense. It makes a little more sense as text beginning to come on. So anytime you have some kind of motion with your text, consider that you probably want it to be invisible until it's ready to land, and use opacity. And I like the way a blur looks lots of times. Depending, of course, if you were doing something that was all hard edged, you might want to have the text be completely hard edged. But still, I think that having it invisible until it came on would be a plus. Okay, so now I will do it again, and we'll see how this goes. So let's share the screen. And so I can do it again. I'm going to make a new, so composition, new composition, and I'm going to call this one Leaping Fox. That way it has a different name. Making sure that it's 5 seconds long once again. Making sure that it's HDV, HDTV 720, 29.97. And here's the background color right down here. So if you have changed your background color for your comp so you can read something that was black before, which I think I even suggested that for some people. Because the background color does not render when you make the animation itself. It will always come out as black. But if you're working with black text and you're working in a subcomp that's going to be on top of something else, you want to be able to see the text while you're working with it. So you might want to change the background color. Right now we're going to leave it black. I'll say okay. I'm going to say fit so it fits the screen. Now here's my empty comp. I'm going to come up to my text tool, double click so it will enter the text in the middle, and I will type leaping fox. Now this, of course, since it's larger, because it's 2 words instead of 1, maybe I'd want to make this a slightly smaller size, but I think it'll work. So the size I told you was 178 px and bold. Make sure it's bold. And now I'm going to say file, save, so that's saved at this point. And I need to get the leaping fox. So if I push this in here, it's just going to make another one. Fine. I'm going to import the leaping fox again because I'm doing this as a tutorial again. So I want people to be able to follow along. And here's my project 3 folder. So I know this is the one I'm working in. And I can tell that this is the project that I do have open. I'm going to go down to my flat images. This is where I moved that file when I downloaded it. I downloaded it into this folder. And I'm going to open it. I'm going to take this JPEG and pull it behind the text. I'm going to make sure to change my cursor selection tool. I'm going to Command S to make sure it's saved because nothing's gone wrong yet. I always say save when nothing goes wrong because it's important. And now while this is selected, I'm going to make sure that I've got my track mat showing. So click down here if it's not. Make sure you've got your track mat showing here in the bar inside of the timeline. I'm going to come down to the Fox layer. I'm going to go under track mat and I'm going to change that to say alpha mat. And there's the fox showing through the text. So it's like a little window. I'm going to use position to move that over. I'm going to use position and I'm going to move it by scrubbing the number for X so that his nose comes over to the X. Then I'm going to scrub the number for Y so that his face comes down. Gonna get that. So I think his eye can be centered in the X. I think that looks good. And now that's done, except look, this image is not big enough for the L to show. Well, I don't like that. So I'm going to change the scale because I want his eye to show through that last letter. I'm going to change the scale and make him bigger so that his tail will cover, or at least his snow will appear in the text. And then I'm going to go back to position. And I'm going to move him so he nicely fits inside again.
Miss, quick question. What if we don't have TrackMan on the team?
If it's not showing,
Yeah.
and you click down here in the button at the bottom, it says toggle switches and modes.
Okay, let me check. Okay.
Did it show?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it shows.
Okay. Yeah, so that is the toggle switches and modes button. And then if that didn't show down there, then your preset might be different. But in that case, if you come here, and let's see, and you right click in the gray at the top, right above the list of the layers, in the gray at the top of the timeline, come down to columns and you can choose what things are showing. See, so right now modes is showing. So it's got a check mark. So that's another way you can get things to appear up here. Because if you look at this, you can see in the columns, there's so many columns that you wouldn't want those all showing at the same time. Because if you did, if you had them all showing, you wouldn't have any room for your timeline. It would be stretched out across your whole screen. So that way you can control what shows. Okay, so now we're at this position. We've got our track mat, and I'm going to show you all the different varieties. You can have it alpha inverted, so it's inside out. You can have it luma, or you can have it luma inverted. I'm going to go back to alpha mat. Okay, I'm going to save at this point, Command S. And now I'm going to select the layer that has Leaping Fox, the text. And you can see the eyeball's not showing, but it's a mask. At the same time, it's still text. So if I click on the little caret next to the layer name, it will open out and show you text, and across from text, you'll see the animate. Now, click on the arrow and get position, and that will create animator 1. And I'll fly down the range selector right away so you can see this as I add things. So I'm going to go over from animator 1 to the word add, and I'm going to click on the arrow, and I'm going to add a property of scale. I'm going to add a property of opacity, and I'm going to add a property of blur. So now I can put in the different numbers for that. I'm going to start by, well, I'll keyframe start, just so I know this is keyframed. So frame 0 is a keyframe. But now I'm going to change the position. I'm going to move it up using the Y, so it's above the top of the frame. I'm going to change the scale to 400. So it's absolutely huge. I'll move it up a little bit more so it doesn't show yet. I'm going to change the opacity to 0. And I'm going to use a blur. I'm going to put in a blur of 100%, or 100 pixels, basically 100 pixels. So it's blurring 100 pixels in each direction. I'm going to drag my CTI out to 215. So I come out just past 2 and past 10F. Come over here, this is 216, move it back just a little, get it to line up with 215. So here in my number over to the left, you can see it says the number 215. And now I'm going to change the start value to 100%. And that will put in another keyframe. And once again, there it is. So this is another way that you can play around with your text, with the way that it appears, with the way that it comes on. And here, this is your bonus information. Sometimes you want to add something even more interesting. But this actually becomes chaotic. Do you like chaos? I'll show you some chaos. I'm going to add a selector. I'm going to add a selector for wiggly. I will just leave the presets for wiggly on, but I'll show you what they are. Maximum amount 100%, minimum amount negative 100%. So it's going to vary between all being done and nothing being done. 2 wiggles per second, 50% correlation. I'm just not going to change any of these. So it's telling you what it's going to do. And this is what it looks like. So you see, you can get something looking really different, really interesting. But you have to be aware that it puts a wiggly selector on everything that you have added to that animator. Every property that is in there is being randomly changed. Everything that you changed before, it's randomly mixing it up. So if you don't want it to be visible the whole time, you have to actually go ahead and either add another animator for opacity or just use your transform for opacity. because you don't want it to be doing this the whole time. I'm going to come to about 1 second, and I'm going to set a keyframe for opacity here, and then I'm going to go back to 0, and I'm going to change it to 0%. And then it's not bouncing around the whole time. So it comes on slightly gradually. So that's another thing that you can do if you want to make your animation look really different. I'm not requiring you to do that part, but that's an extra for you. Okay, so did it twice. You don't have to do the part with the legally selector. That's just for your information, okay? But all you need to do is get the text to move on and to have this really interesting masking happening so you can see your image behind through the text. And that's, I think, a real fun thing to do.